Great. Hi, everybody. I'm Bridget Marty with the Carlson Business Career Center for another installment of Career Cues. And today I have with me Ryan Collier, who is one of our esteemed alumni from the part-time MBA program here at Carlson. And he's going to share a bit about his career journey, working in a variety of sectors, but with some nice through lines around technology and sales and strategy. So help learn a little bit more about that space. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Ryan. Could you share a bit about your career journey?
Well, sure. Thank you very much for inviting me to this little shindig you do. So it should be noted for all people online that A, I'm a big Bridget fan, and two, a Career Center servant. I get many referrals sent over from this lovely desk, and I'm
Career
always,
is a team sport. It's a team sport. So.
it is. And
Yeah.
as mentioned, yes, I was part of the MBA program part time, class of I guess 21. I already forgot that. So anyway, so a little bit like my career story. So technology has been core of my journey since I've been a child. I've had my first computer when I was 9 years old, and that was before really the internet was around and all the other things. But so technology has always been there. I kind of started in corporate IT, so hands-on sort of server networking stuff. I had the unique experience of getting my first Fortune 500 corporate job when I was 15 years old. I was a high school internship that turned into a 5-year internship all the way through college. So I've had the unique statement of saying I never had an entry level job because I started when I was 15, and so I came out as a sort of a pseudo polished ish corporate person. So, but I moved to Minneapolis after college, undergrad, and I had a call from this small company called Accenture. Didn't know who they were, literally, because they're. I grew up on the east side of Wisconsin, and so the Accentures, the Deloittes, those are not like people who knock on your door. So I got a call from this place called Accenture, and I was like, yeah, let me call you back. And I called them back, and they had this. I called them back, and they were looking for this role for an outsourcing gig thing, and so I took it.
Yeah.
I joined this thing, and lo and behold, I was like, wow, I got into this crazy thing called management consulting, and so I did a little stint at Accenture and their other sort of services business, and then I said, I kind of want to embark on this adventurous path, and that started a 15-year career in management consulting across three of the big four. So Accenture for 5.5 years, Deloitte for 5.5 years, and PwC for about a year and a half. But I got to the point where partnership was next. So as a senior manager director in those firms, sort of the next logical step is to go through the grinder for 4 or 5 years and then make partner. And similar to probably others that have had this problem will come knocking on your door. I decided, what do I want to be
Yeah.
when I grow up? And that was when I was like 30 something. So I sought guidance from a career coach. So I hired a career coach, and we did a bunch of stuff that you do in career coaching, forms and scores, and I don't know what they are. Assess my
Crystal
brain.
ball, like a crystal ball.
Yeah,
Yes. Yep.
exactly.
Yep.
And I was told like you should, you have a perfect profile for somebody in sales. And I said, well, that's funny. I've always been a seller across my career and my personal life, but never took it to the level of like, let's go be a salesperson or do something like a quota and a variable compensation package. So I jumped into that, and jumped into this career called a relationship curator, aka technology sales. And so I spent 5 years at EMC Dell Technologies through the merger, and really enjoyed. I worked with a very large Thomson Reuters was my account for globally, which was a really interesting thing. So being able to connect the dots between relationships, business units, technology providers, you name it. And then after that, I jumped over to Google Cloud. So I spent the last 4 years now at Google Cloud, serving one of the largest electronic retailers that we probably all know of, and kind of helping them navigate the journey to cloud, as well as bringing insights and value out of their data sets. So that's the quick version of my career story.
I love that. Thanks, Ryan. I appreciate too. That you took a leap. You took a leap in your 30s, right? You made a pivot, and that's always a little scary. And I do think that the folks listening or watching this can understand that. Often we're pursuing graduate degrees, and we're in a time of transition, and that's a nice time to explore things. So you mentioned when you refer to your career in sales, you mentioned it as a relationship curator, which leads me into my next question, which is, when you think about your work, kind of as it is now, more specifically in the sales space, can you share some of like the big buckets of your work? And I'm gonna guess that relationship curator is probably one of those buckets.
Yeah. Well, I think I made up that term just on the fly, but
We'll
I think I
trademark
use
it.
that I use that term because I think so often, one, I think Carlson, can pick it up a little bit on the sales course and career wise, but I think a lot of people think about technology or sellers as sort of like, oh, you just knock on the door and you're selling vacuums basically. But I think there is a huge gap of people maybe misunderstand the lucrativeness of technology sales that is very underrated. And it's not because I just hustle people, but it's really this curation of relationships. And so what do I do on a sort of a bucket? I would kind of say three buckets. I kind of have in-flight efforts, right? So the caring and feeding of either opportunities or things that have sold or are being consumed or whatever you take it. So there's sort of administrivia and caring and feeding and making sure that the right people are doing the right thing. So that's a chunk of my time. I think the next thing is sort of what I would kind of consider like the next best action, right? So how do I take something that is in flight or pretty close? How do I pull that thread and see what is the next sort of loophole to connect to? And so not a cold call like way out, like maybe way over here, but like, hey, we're doing something here. The next logical step is over here. So how do we pull the thread? How do we pull the credibility and those activities to the next level? And then I think the third one is sort of this land and expand. So this cold, what I would kind of consider more like cold reach out or network building. So this curation of relationships. So as I look at going, I'm doing these efforts in this space. We've never touched this business unit, this business organization, or what this topic. I start having to think about how do we get in that space? How do we start building who's who in the zoo, and where do we go from there? So those are the kind of the three buckets, and then the fourth bucket is like picking up my kids from school
Yeah,
and managing, OT and doctor's appointments.
and
So
shenanigans, like
yeah,
the
that's the
daily
fourth
routine.
bullet.
Yeah. Yeah, and so I'm really interested to hear then how these larger buckets of your work show up in like a typical day, because one of the common questions, our students and candidates are interested in is like, am I working collaboratively in this work? Am I going to be by myself? Am I in meetings all day? Am I getting to ideate and intellectualize? What does it like actually look like? And so I'm guessing there's some consistent components to your work throughout the week or the month or the sales cycle. And wondering if you can just illuminate like what a day might look like, what kinds of things that you're actually doing on a daily basis.
Yeah, I'll add a little color commentary before I answer sort of my sort of typical day, because I think as you look at a sales career, it is maybe similar to other jobs that you start as sort of like a fresh greenhorn doing whatever, and then you kind of move your way up. But I think the difference though is that your actual activity and how you deliver each day changes pretty drastically from like maybe a cold seller, like inside sales, just calling anybody, just trying to get somebody to say hello, to somewhere like more mature in my career where I'm leading maybe one or two major accounts that are spending a ton of money, and that day looks very different than the other part in your
Sure.
career. And so I just want to kind of connect those
Right.
dots. But in,
Right.
in essence, the major buckets are probably exactly the same,
Mhm.
except just the activity. So for me, a typical day is obviously you got the email bucket of collaboration, that stuff. And then you have content creation. So that's going to be what do I need to create, curate, modify, consume for a next meeting or a next session or the next follow up, right? So it's from as simple as, hey, we got to introduce what's my viewpoint on what we're doing for chief marketing officers and the cloud, right? Or whatever that might be. And then in the sales world, we have a lot of curated and created content for us, but customers don't like things that are just downloaded and presented to them. So I must take that content, jazz it up, remove some stuff, modify some stuff, and polish it up. So content creation, whatever that might be, and then I think the next thing is planning that next move, right? And so as I mentioned, the three buckets of what I do. I think planning the next move is something I think about. It's not something I sit down with like a spreadsheet or a calendar. It's something I'm always thinking about. For the worst of it, I mean, sometimes it's in the middle of the night and you can't sleep because it's not because of stress. It's just I move. It's this chess master game, right? Of like, where do we got to go? And then like the last thing I kind of think about is the mind map of mapping reporting relationships, structures, and the path to those points along the matrix of a network or a relationship. So those are kind of the four things I do. And then of course there's internal administrivia of forecasting and dealing with stuff that's not my problem, but it becomes my problem. So that.
Well, you might be offering some kind of, you're offering strategic insight on those things, or you have an opinion to share or perspective. That makes sense.
Yeah, and there's also internal stuff that I involve, helping others. So you mentioned, what is the day like? Are you by yourself, sitting in a room
Yeah.
all alone? Probably in this post-COVID world you are, but as an individual contributor, as we call it, an IC, it's the lingo. Just for a moment, I have led very large teams. I've led 25, 30 people. So I've been the manager, the director, the big sort of boss man. I took an individual contributor job and I love it. So for all of those people who are like, well, man, I want to be a manager. Yeah, I'm sure you do. But
Try it out.
in the world of sales, you have a pretty self-driven, destiny as an individual contributor. And individual contributor does not mean you're an individual all by yourself. So all of these organizations are highly matrixed and specialized. So you can imagine if you think about my job as more of a general contractor, and I have all these subs that are, plumbers and electricians and all the things. So replace all those names with different technologies, different products, different solution stacks to solve problems. And so my job as this general contractor is to, one, know the customer or the client better than they know themselves. Two, understand and brief my subs on what not to say, what to say, and make them not look like a fool. Like, well, I didn't. Do you use the cloud? And they're spending millions of dollars, and so it's like try not to like have people do obviously stupid things. So that is what I mean by it's an individual contributor role, but it's highly matrix
Right.
organization. Doesn't matter where you work. When I was at Dell, we had an account team of 120 people worldwide to deliver on our account. So I mean, it's a lot of orchestration to be done. So
That's a great, I really, really love this, the analogy of the contractor and the subs. That makes a lot of sense to me. And, I think and speak in metaphor and analogy often. So I think that is really helpful to also just illustrate the importance of the relationship building and rapport you need to have within your organization to know the products and the tools and the people to make it happen. And so, in listening, to your answers from these past few questions, there's a couple of skills that I have jotted down that surfaced for, that I think, oh, these are some helpful skills in a sales career. So I want to share those, and then I'd love to have you add on all the other stuff or color and what
sure.
that looks like. So I hear lots of strategy of, strategically thinking, zooming in, zooming out, looking at what's ahead, what's the next step, what do I need to do to put things into place. So I definitely heard strategy. I definitely am inferring a lot of strong communication skills, written, verbal, visual, and a coachability that, like we were just talking now about when you're working with the subs or you're talking to other folks, needing to be able to share with them, here's what we want you to do, here's what we don't want you to do. They have to be coachable. You have to be able to coach. There has to be a part of that, even as an individual contributor.
Yes.
What did I miss? What other things would you
Well,
suggest?
no, I think that was a really like a very sexy version of what I would have described as. I think business acumen, I think, is also
Mm,
important because you're not just selling to maybe the IT executives who are like, oh yeah, I know what the cloud is, or I know what this is, or whatever the technology you're doing. But you have to translate that and understand sort of like business owners who say, I'm not buying tech, I'm buying a solution, I'm buying an outcome, I'm driving something to my bottom line or my SG&A, or pick your favorite MBA category of things. So that business acumen either is learned or already known, or in my case, I build it on the fly for the business or the accounts I'm in, right? Which takes a little bit of understanding what they do, and obviously, if you have one account, much easier. If you have lots of accounts, it's called Gemini, also known as generative AI, to get yourself a sales briefing for every meeting you have in 3 or 4 sentences or less. But that's the new world we live in. So I think one, business acumen. Number two, I think you mentioned communication, but I also think it's around creative writing and creative communication and being that using chess master mind tricks. And what I mean is like, I don't want to see a canned email of like, hey, let's offer you a free assessment of your widgets.
Mm,
Yeah, no.
mm,
Like, how do you write that? How do you adjust that to be in your own style so it doesn't look like it came from a robot? Number two, how does it actually address something that you might know about me? Because people buy things from people, one, that they like. Two, they buy from people who understand or at least perceive to understand what they do. And number three, you're there to solve a problem they have, not a quota or a compensation package that you have.
mm.
So you need to change how you communicate both verbally and in writing or other methods.
Like a very
And then,
individualized approach is what I'm
yeah,
hearing. So, and that kind of people first, like, like
yeah,
know the person that you are reaching
yeah.
out
You
to.
have to make them feel like, I mean, you know what you're trying to do, but you have to like keep that underneath the covers and present what's valuable to them, what's valuable to their organization, not to you, but knowing that you've sort of mapped this out of like, oh, if we did this, this is how this is going to be good for me and my company, but also for them. I think that another skill, if you want to say, is comfort in the uncomfortable.
Mm,
Um, you get told no, you get told you screwed that up, you get told we don't do that, even though you're like, I know you don't do that, but like the content isn't on par or whatever. That people have bad days,
mm,
all the above, and so you have to be okay with that. Like my wife is like cannot fathom the thing I do every day. Like she's like, I don't know how you reach out to random people. I don't know how you have conversations with people you barely know or randos, and how do you like take interviews as if it's a standard day at work? And that's
mm,
all those are all things that I'm just used to doing. And I think the last thing is that part of that is the daily learner, right? You can't be just a lifetime learner is a cute word, but like a daily learner, like because in the world of technology, things move in moments and days. And so understanding what your competition did or didn't do, what something in the industry has done or hasn't done, and being informed at that moment for that meeting in 10 minutes that their stock just crashed 10 points because of an earnings call,
mm. Right.
because they're very well aware of that, so you need to be at that point, and that's a daily learner mindset, not a lifetime learner
I love
mindset.
that. That's a great phrase, but I'm totally going to steal from you, Ryan, of
Not at
course.
all.
I appreciate this too, and just how you kind of framed up, comfortable with the on comfort, kind of managing through denials, delays, detours, all the things that are going to happen. And I just, as a bonus question here, when you started
Oh,
in
not off the script,
this is
please.
off
No.
script. Yep, this is a
Wait, I don't have this prepared.
outtakes. When you started in this, in your sales career, like you said, you had, a decade plus in management consulting, which was already, that is an intensive career space too. So, you were coming in kind of stress tested a little bit
Yeah.
already, but what would you say was one of the steepest learning curves for you? Because I know we're seeing you as this fully formed, amazing human. And I want to make sure that folks watching and listening to this know there's a learning curve even for you who
Mhm.
came out of an intense career already, but you came into a new space still.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, behind this facade, I'm barely pulled together. It should be noted. But no, exactly. So every day, I mean, it's this the comfort and the uncomfortable because for example, I'll just use when I took was leading on my Dell account, Thomson Reuters. I didn't know anything about the finance data reporting system or legal stuff that they do or all the business units that TR does, right? And so I walk into that going, I don't even know this industry, even though I spent, like I said, a decade more doing management consulting and acting on my toes daily. But like now I need to bring some sort of relevancy, some sort of context that makes sense for a conversation. And so that's a daily thing. And so that's a struggle, I mean, you have to just do every day, even for accounts you really know, you don't know every role in corporate. I mean, think about undergrad or an MBA program, and you think about all the areas you talk about: marketing, finance, accounting. Had talking to SVP of services is different than talking to the chief marketing officer. What do I know about retail data networks and partnerships with large electronic vendors? No idea. Merchandising, no idea. But like, and then I got to overlay that with what I do as a living in the company I represent, and how do we bring a relevant conversation to all of those players? And that's a daily thing,
I
and
love that. I love
takes a
that.
little bit of whatever to
Oh,
do.
and I appreciate that, Ryan, because I think that as something I've said before on some of these is that we often will see someone starts a new job and they post that on LinkedIn. And what we don't see behind the scenes is the hustle. And we don't know what those first few weeks or months are like in a role, and that you feel new and you can feel a little out of sorts those first few months, years even into a role, but that growth. And I really love that daily learner concept is helpful. So thank you so much, Ryan, for sharing your experience in your career journey. And we hope to be connecting with you again about the wild world of sales.
I hope so too. Thank you.